I'm recording this off the back of my last episode, so I'm still in recovery mode, getting there slowly but surely. But sometimes it's quite interesting to record these things when, you've come through illness, because I feel like you kind of get out of the way and you can almost channel or transmit or hear more in that process. So I wanted to speak on something that I spoke about in the last episode, which was if we don't make different choices, nothing will change in our life, right? So then the question is, well, how do we change our behavior? Because a lot of our behavior is very habitual. We're really in the habit of reacting in a certain way. And the reaction is there because of a behavior, because of a certain pattern and a belief system, and really an identity that part is very attached to. So I want to go into how do we actually change these things? How do we actually evolve beyond these identities and behaviors and therefore reactions so that we can really change our lives? I feel like I'm constantly in the evolution myself, and I can feel myself going through a certain phase of that as well. So I'll share a little bit about where I'm at with that as well, because I think we're all having to do this because we're all habituated in some way. So you're so not alone. But let's dive in and see where it takes us. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So right off the bat, I want to say that, being human, I spoke about this last week a little bit. It's an intense experience, right? With this whole spectrum of emotions and sensations and everything, right? And so this whole process, when we're going inwards and we're looking at ourselves, requires so much compassion and patience, and I'll even throw in the word forgiveness, because again, whether it's part of our human design or how we've been taught, we can be self-critical, we can be self-judgmental, and it's really important to go into any kind of inward journey with a really with a gentleness, just with a gentle kindness that, can we look at these parts of us with curiosity and with compassion and not make it about how we're not good enough and not worthy? That's what I feel like we've really been indoctrinated into. And once we have enough space to be able to observe that, then we can slowly start to detach ourselves from that paradigm of thinking, because that's really what it is. It's not the truth. It's not the truth of who you are. So that is just the foundation of all of this. Requires compassion and kindness and gentleness. I really like that word of just like, can you be gentle with yourself? So, okay, where to begin? Because there's so much here. Okay, I want to start off with another kind of fundamental piece of knowing. It's really hard. It's not impossible, but it's really hard to do this work when we're in survival mode, which is a little bit of a catch-22, because it's kind of like, well, we need to do this work if we're in survival mode, but to really change our patterns of behavior, if we're in survival mode, it makes it challenging. It makes it hard. And the reason for that is because if we're in survival mode, like working on our emotions is like not an option, because that part is like, I'm just trying to survive. I don't want to go deep into my emotional shit. I'm just trying to get through the day here, right? I'm just trying to get through life. So if you are in a place where you feel like you're in survival mode or you're highly stressed, the first steps are going to be, how do you regulate your nervous system? That is just a prerequisite to doing this work. How do you bring your nervous system into a place of, I feel safe, so I can actually come into a state of being and reflection, because it's very hard to reflect, to self-reflect, especially if we're in that kind of survival mode. So whatever that might be for you, whether it's doing some physical movement or breathing or getting a massage or doing something that's creative and artistic or taking a bath or whatever it is that allows you to decompress, come out of the hamster wheel of the mind down into your body, but not into the anxiety of the body, but truly into a state of, I am safe, I am okay, I'm calm, well, I don't want to say I'm in peace because that might be a little bit too great a jump, but just that you feel safe. That is really, really, really important. So I really encourage you to discover what that is for you. What allows you to just relax and soothe your nervous system. Once we're there, and as I'm speaking, it's like, God, I feel like I've been doing this for a long time. And so cultivating self-awareness is, I think it's a part of life. I don't think you ever get to this point of like, I'm self-aware and I, can observe everything and I know exactly what to do and, I've arrived. I don't think that's the way life works, because it's constantly expanding, right? We're constantly evolving, not because we need to become better because we're not good enough. I'm going to hone that one in, but because we're curious about growth. We're curious about expansion. And so I see it more as this is a relationship that we have with ourselves and that point of awareness. And when I say awareness, it's not the critic that's observing and scrutinizing you. Self-awareness is that kind, gentle witness that is like, oh, let's look at this. And going back to the survival piece, because I was having some messages back and forth with a really dear friend of mine, and she was like, I can really see that you're evolving right now, and I can hear the tone of your voice. Everything has changed since you've moved. And how, sometimes you do just need to put yourself into a different environment. And also like traveling can really be expansive, but sometimes we're simply not in the right environment. And I remember when I was living where I was for 8.5 years, in the final years, I was really unhappy. And there was a woman that reached out to me and said, it sounds like you're really going through perimenopausal symptoms. This kind of dip and all of these things. And I was thinking, okay, sure, there's validity to that. I'm looking at my hormones, but I knew with every fiber of my being, because I'm someone that doesn't shy away from aspects of myself, especially the shadow. But I knew with every fiber of my being, I'm like, no, in this case, that's not it. Like, I am looking at my hormones. I am taking care of myself. I do notice the 2 days dip sometimes before my period. But I also know it's highly affected by my environment. But in this case, I knew I just was not in the right place anymore. And the analogy that I was using with a friend of mine was, it's like sometimes a plant literally outgrows its pot and it starts to die. It starts to wither unless and until you repot it. And sometimes you repot it into a bigger pot and you move it into a different part of the house. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom, it just expands and explodes and grows. And it's like, yeah, it needed to be relocated. Actually, quite literally needed to be relocated. And so, we have to check in with what is our motivation. Are we escaping? And I think, are we escaping, or are we really going, okay, I've faced everything and I just know what I need to do in order to be able to expand into my next level of evolution. And so I think the last year, especially for me, was this, I was really in the, I am going to face everything because I don't want to be leaving this as an escape of trying to run away from something. It's not my style anyhow. It's not really my personality, but it was like I was really wanting to make sure that there wasn't any kind of illusion of, well, if I go there, my life will be better, because there's the saying, wherever you go, there you are, right? You take yourself wherever you go. So I did a lot of kind of, reflection, self-reflection and cleansing and purging. And, a lot of these words get thrown around, but it was just the being with. That's my favorite term that I've used since almost the beginning of my practice, that kind of came into me, that was like, right, this is all about being with. And I put that in italics because I really want that to stand out. And it's that simple. It's not always easy because we have been taught to distract or numb or all of the things, right? But the being with, to me, is this invitation to be gentle with ourselves. Just like I've said in the past, of how would you want your best friend to sit with you when you're going through a hard time? It's not that kind of, oh, let's just go out and get drunk and, gossip and, be all bitchy about this, that, and the other. And then you have a moment of satisfaction and then you go back home and you're like, oh God, I still feel like crap. That's not what I mean. I mean that true presence of like, I'm here for you. I love you. I accept you. I'm here to give you a hug. I'm here to hold your hand. I'm here to just sit next to you so that you don't feel like you're alone. And I'm just here to listen. And I'm here to love you. I'm not going to give you advice unless you ask for it. I'm not going to fix it because that's not what you need. What you need is my loving presence. And so this is what we need to internalize and give to ourselves in this process. So I feel like I really went through a phase and a process of doing that. And so then when I left and I started this journey and, the real adventure in Mexico first, I felt so much like I was able to be really present with that. And I still had stuff come up because things will come up when you're thrown outside of your comfort zone. I didn't have a house. That's like a huge necessity that we have, right? And so that will trigger up a lot of basic instincts. And, but, now that I've kind of settled, even though I'm still looking for my long-term home, but I feel at least geographically, at least for now, it feels good that I feel like I'm in the larger pot now. I've been placed into the larger pot and it's like, oh, now I can kind of grow and expand and reach new heights, and it's wonderful. And so then you're not in the kind of survival of not being happy or the survival of I'm feeling claustrophobic because I'm in too small of a pot and it's literally killing me. That's what it felt like. It literally felt, I was saying to a friend of mine today, I was like, oh God, I do miss the fact that I used to have, a 4-bedroom house that I paid very little for, but I was like, I wouldn't want to go back to that life because it just felt like a roomy coffin. I literally felt like I was just waiting for my death. So I wouldn't hand that in. I wouldn't exchange my life now for that, even though I'm so desperate for home. Well, I say desperate, I'm just really ready, that would be such a welcoming. But, having this expansion of being in a larger pot allows me to like, okay. So now I don't know, I feel like I'm in this phase right now. It's kind of an interesting time of year with the equinox, which is really coming into balancing, and it's a letting go, the metaphoric falling of the leaves. And really looking at, okay, what are some patterns of behavior that I don't need anymore? So as I was speaking to last week, I think, was just this, I don't want to have this I don't want to have the paradigm of struggle anymore. Like I've done that. I've played that out. I don't feel like I need it. It's actually keeping me from my own evolution and growth. Now, here's the thing. When we're looking at patterns of behavior, this is where the compassion really needs to come in, because it might not happen like that, right? Because like I said, we're habituated. It is literally a habit, and any kind of habit, if the easiest thing to point to is if you have a habit towards sugar or television or social media or alcohol or cigarettes or something like that, where it has this kind of feeling of an addictive nature. And it doesn't even need to be an addiction. That's not really what it is. It's literally a habit. It's literally a habit. So that requires a certain amount of patience, because it might not happen overnight. It might, but it might not. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's not working. But I think this is where the gentleness and the compassion piece comes in. But I think when we can observe, so we're not in survival mode, and we have the ability to observe a little bit more. So I use the example of traffic and how I was observing myself really going into this like state of anger and frustration, and it would really get me. And now I have a trigger point muscularly, because when I go into that state of tension and anger, it will often trigger a migraine. So I now have this physical thing that's like, you know what you're going to get into. And in a way, it's quite helpful, because it'll immediately pull me back into like, okay, relax, relax, relax. Like, this isn't a helpful response. And I think we need to see that. We need to, like, coming out of the identity, because the identity will be stubborn. The identity doesn't care if it's good for you or not. It's like, this is who I am, and you're not going to get rid of me. Like, again, this ties into the conversation last week of death. Sometimes it's the death of an identity. And for the ego, that's terrifying, right? That feels like non-existence. But what that part doesn't see or recognize is that it's not the death of who you are. It's just a death of a part of you. And actually, when that part can let go and die, a new part can emerge and have a rebirth that is so much more in harmony and in alignment and in coherence, as I talked about 2 weeks ago, it's going to be so much more fulfilling and joyful because it's more in alignment with who you truly are, right? And so this is the evolution. The evolution isn't because you need to become this better person. The evolution is fine-tuning and refining so that you get closer to who you already truly are as the essence of who you are. And then you can allow that essence to evolve. So this is the soul that evolves, right? And the classroom is being human. So I recognize with the anger and frustration that I was like, okay, I'm so aware of it. I can see myself kicking off. I can see myself being like, I could make a different choice right now. There's that really kind, loving observer, witness that isn't criticizing me, but is like gently inviting me, lovingly inviting me, like, you can make a different choice right now, Corinne, you know? And then this part that's like, no, I'm not going to make a different choice. I'm angry and I want to feel angry. And you know what? That's cool. That's fine. That is part of the process, is sometimes, you know what, really let yourself feel it, because often we're suppressing. And so then it's kind of passive aggressively coming out, or it's not fully being expressed. And the thing that I've learned about emotions is that if you give them full permission to just be and to express themselves, not by lashing out on others, I'm talking about taking self-responsibility, but in what way do you need to release that energy? Because that's all it is. Emotions are energy. In what way do you need to release that energy so that you're not suppressing and holding on to it? So, you know, if you're in the car by yourself, that might mean screaming. It might mean going out for a run. It might mean going and dancing. It might mean singing. It might mean sitting there and crying. I don't know what it is for you. It doesn't matter. That's for you to discover. But what will allow you to just feel it so that you can let go of it? Because the moment you feel an emotion and you allow the energy to come up and out, it goes away very quickly. You see it with children. Watch a toddler. They will have a massive tantrum, and then the next moment they're like, oh, they're fine. And, you know, I'm not saying that we want to necessarily replicate that behavior as adults. You know, we can do it in a little bit more of a, what's the right word? I don't want to say contained, because that's not right. Conscious process, rather than just, you know, I'm sure many adults, we'd love to just like fall on the ground at the supermarket and just kick and scream and have a tantrum. But what's going to be the more conscious, productive way of doing that as adults, since we don't have the permission to do that like kids do? So, but that is a big piece, like allowing the energy, see it as energy, to come up and out in a constructive way. Then when we recognize that it's like, okay, I've gotten that out of my system enough times, I've gotten that enough out of my system, then I think we really get to this choice point of, well, do I want to continue to make this choice? Do I want to continue to make this choice of reactivity? And that's where our power really comes in, and our sovereignty, and we're no longer at the mercy of life or anyone or anything else, be it a person or be it God or be it universe. We're actually really taking hold of the reins and being able to shift the direction, right? Like we're taking we're steering the ship instead of being caught in the storm. And then this is a process as well. It's like, okay, maybe the reactivity time is shorter. Maybe I still have a reaction, but the reactivity time is shorter because as I'm in the reaction, I'm totally conscious of it. And so then I can go, okay, Corinne, you know, have you expressed that? Can we come back to center? No judgment, no right or wrong, no good or bad, no praise or punishment. But just like, okay, can we come back to center now? And so the reactivity time is less. And then also I find this so useful when you're either in relationship or you're parenting, is that when you're conscious of the whole process and you can bring yourself back to center, that's when we can take self-responsibility and go, God, sorry, I really reacted there. I'm sorry if it made you feel da 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 da, or I can imagine it might have made you feel da 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 da. But we're fully taking self-responsibility and in that moment claiming it, and because arguments with partners, it can get into this such unconscious attack defense. And there's no self-responsibility and there's no real presence. That's like a habit. It's a pattern that repeats itself again and again and again. You might as well have it pre-recorded and just play it and be like, okay, there's the argument, because this is what you have every single time. But you can actually take responsibility. And then that person doesn't need to carry on, especially with children. They don't need to carry your emotional stuff and make it theirs, or make it their fault, or make it something that they need to fix, or have it be unspoken and then therefore confusing. What I've seen, like with my daughter, for example, is that the moment I take self-responsibility, she's like, that's okay. And she goes into empathy mode, which is beautiful. And I think we absolutely have this capacity that when we realize that we don't have to defend, ourselves, so we don't have to come back with a rebuttal and an attack, or we're in the confusion of like, what the hell is all this emotion? And I is this mine? Is this yours? And we're in that state of confusion. When it's very clear and it's lovingly held with self-responsibility, we can go, oh, okay, this isn't mine. And so then I can actually just see you as another human being and go, wow, okay, I have compassion for you. That must have been an experience for you. But it's not my shit to have to process. So then I'm not dealing with my own quagmire of stuff inside of me. And we can purely be this innate, compassionate being that we truly are. And I wholeheartedly believe that we are that. So then the next step is kind of getting to that point of you might feel the trigger and then go, you know what? I'm not going to go into reaction. It's like the tree trunk. I remember learning this in this authenticity leadership course that I took when I was in my mid 20s. God, where does life go? And the image is of a tree trunk, and they call it either you go into thrive mode or survive mode. So survival mode is you go up into one branch, and thrive mode would be you change the course and you go into another branch. But it's slowing down the process of that energy that gets fueled up the tree trunk. And so first, when there's no consciousness, it goes up the tree trunk and goes straight to the direction of the exit of survival mode, right? And so then this whole bringing in conscious awareness is slowing down that process, so that as it's going up the trunk, it's like, hold up, wait a second. I'm not going to take the exit that I always take. I'm going to take this exit instead. And I'm going to go down like highway thrive. So this is how we then can notice the trigger. And then we go, wait a second. Okay, pause, breathe. What choice do I want to make right now? And this is where you've heard me say, when it's unconscious, we go into reaction. When it's conscious, we go into response. I get to choose how I want to respond rather than unconsciously just triggered reaction, right? Which is the same repeat. You might as well bring out the record and press play. Then when we make that conscious choice to do it differently, that's when we start to see a change of behavior. And then it's making a new habit, a healthier habit of like, oh, this way, it's like reaffirming that this way feels so much better. This way feels so much more relaxing. This way makes me actually feel excited because I can feel I'm evolving. Now, one thing to point out is that this is so convoluted, and I don't fully understand the science of it, but there is the science of it, so I don't know the terminology. But there is literally I don't know if it's some dopamine, there's some hormone that's released where we actually have an addiction to our negativity. We have an addiction to our suffering and our trauma response and our struggle. And I don't know why, but there is some hormone that is released, and that feels good. It strangely feels good. So I want to point that out, because when some people go, God, it's so hard, like I see it, but it's so hard to make a different choice. It's recognizing that there actually is some kind of something going on biologically that's also making it quite hard for you to make that different choice. And so that's why come back to patience, compassion, gentleness, forgiveness, because we're working on many, many different layers here. And sometimes we're carrying, genetic codes, ancestral codes, which is just, belief systems being passed on. And so much of the time it's unconscious. And so we're unpacking a lot, right? This is why I'm saying it's intense to be human sometimes. And it just takes so much kindness and patience. So I'm just throwing that in the mix to give you even a greater sense of like, oh, okay, you're not doing it wrong. And sometimes it does just take time. But then it's really important to reaffirm that feeling of like, oh, this feels good, like I'm evolving. But here's the thing, that part, whether it's the hormonal influence or it's the identity, and why I like to talk about ourselves in parts. Some people don't like that at all. Why I find it really useful is because what it does is it gives me just enough space, just enough breathing room to step a little bit back and be able to observe that part of me that is having that habit and that behavior and is making these choices and has those beliefs and those patterns, etc., etc. And I can witness it with enough space to observe it and go, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to get curious about that. I'm going to observe that. And the moment we do that, we start to detach and we start to disidentify with it. And that is huge, because when we can do that, that's when we can make different choices, because we have that breathing room and that space to go, okay, I am not that. And when beliefs and behaviors and reactions are really hard to change is when we feel I am that. I am as the identity. And we think, well, I am that. I am angry, or I am reactive, or I am whatever it is. The moment we say I am that, that's when we got to go, hold up. I need to step a little bit back, and I need to be able to just pull this apart as a part of me. And it has a reason for its behavior. I'm not gonna berate it. I'm not gonna punish it, because actually what it needs is love. Like it's scared, or it's overwhelmed, or it's anxious, or it feels alone, or it doesn't feel good enough, or our behavior always has a reason. There's always a motivation for our behavior, and that really requires compassion. So we can't berate it, right? That's not going to help anything. It's also not something that we want to fix, because that's, if you've ever had a partner that's like, I'm going to fix you, I'm going to give you advice and tell you what to do and fix you and make you better, you're like, F you, like get off my back. It never helps. Never helps. We're inspired through support and compassion and love. So the moment you say I am about something, just take a step back and look at that just as this isn't who I am. This is a part of me that I have grown accustomed to being very identified with. I'm very identified with that part, but let me create enough space so I can observe it and recognize it. And then eventually I'll get to the point where I can make that different choice, right? So I'll give you an example of something that I was talking about with my friend, and it's something that I'm very, very aware of. So I have this thing. So this is currently what I'm working on, folks. I have always had, I think I've spoken a little bit about this. I've always had this struggle around decisions. And it's sometimes just the little decisions. It's, there's a part of me, it feels a little bit of contradictory, because in some ways I really trust myself and my intuition. But when it comes to little decisions, should I do this or should I do that? Should I go do, to that event or should I not? Should I go on that trip or not? Should I, meet this person today or not? It's like little things like that I find really challenging. And I will make a decision and I won't be happy with it. I will go through this process of like not trusting myself. Oh God, should I have done that? Maybe I should have done that. Oh, I don't, it's kind of a lose-lose situation. So a most recent example was on Friday. I woke up and I think this was the beginning of me getting whatever this bug or infection was. And I was really tired. I had felt so good on Thursday, but I was really tired. And I had the potential, it wasn't set in in stone. It was kind of like, let's see how it flows. But to meet up with someone, because I'm in a new place, I really want to meet people and, just build community, and, maybe they can help with this and that and the other, and just also to get to know how is it to live here and all of these things. So I have the energy for that, right? And so I dropped my daughter off at school, and I was really tired. And I responded to them, and they actually said, "Oh, I didn't go into the city. I didn't take yoga, but you can come, if you want to have a coffee up in the village where I live." And it would have been like an extra half hour, well, even more, because it would have added a lot of driving to my already very full day of driving. And I was like, oh God, can I do that? And remember what I've said in the past, your first thought is always your intuition. And all the thoughts to follow are like your logical, rational brain trying to like figure out if you can make it work or not. So really my first initial intuition was that morning being like, I'm really tired, actually. I don't have the energy to meet this person today. So, and then that came in again. It was like, I'm really tired. My first thought was like, I can't energetically do it. And long story short, I was kind of like, well, I could do it, but then I passed the exit and then I just decided to go home, right? At that point, it was kind of too late, but I wasn't trusting, just like, okay, I need to go home and take care of myself. That is the strongest decision right now that my body clearly needs me to make. But my mind was going, oh, but don't delay it. And then it's another thing that you need to have on your to-do list. And then next week, and then what if it doesn't happen? I want to go on this kind of momentum of meeting people. And, I know they're giving me their time. There was all the reasoning, the logical, rational reasoning. And it has a point. It's all valid. It is logical. But it wasn't what I needed in that moment. And so I parked and I left a message for my friend because I was just like, God, I don't know if I made the wrong decision and maybe I should have just pushed through it and whatever. Then when I got home, I've gotten good enough at it, at least, where I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm really tired. This was the best decision for me to make. But so that's a bit of an example of what happens to me is that I doubt, I second guess. When it was my first thought was very clear because actually it was that evening that I started to get really ill. And the thing is that with things like that, like there's time. It's okay. It's not a do or die decision, but sometimes it feels like that to me. I have no idea where this stems from. I don't know if it's part of my astrology because apparently I've got some Libra and Libras have a really hard time making decisions, or if there's something around it in my childhood. I don't know where to pinpoint it. And a part of me is like, I don't even know if that's important. So what do I do from this point? So what I'm doing now is like, firstly, I now have the awareness, right? And I've had the awareness. I can observe myself going into it. I can observe myself in the process of it. I can observe what it does to me, that it creates a kind of certain distress and discomfort and this kind of, I don't want to say waste of time in a judgmental way, but in a way, a little bit of a waste of time of my energy, just focusing on this rather than just like, okay, that's done. You've made the decision. You are where you are. You're in this present moment. Let it go. Right? But there's still something in me that emotionally is caught into the story of it or is caught into the habit, because part of the habit is the mulling it over. That is the habit. So now I'm aware of it, right? So what do I do the next time it comes up? So one thing is just to go, oh, okay, here it is. Here it's coming up again. This part that doesn't trust my decision, the part that doubts, the part that, isn't sure which one is more right or more wrong or whatever. And I can just observe it. And I think what I'm going to be working on is, this isn't a decision to make with your mind. Make it with your body, because your body really knows. Your body usually tells you this feels good, this feels neutral, or this feels bad. Feels expansive or it feels contracted. And really to trust that, like I've been talking about, we're shifting our center of gravity into a state of being. We're coming out of the mind. The mind is the tool. It is not the master. So we can't make all of our decisions from the mind because the mind will go into all sorts of story. It can be helpful as a tool, not the master. And so my intention is to be like, okay, really check in with your body. And then once I've made a decision, be happy with it. Just accept it and allow it and surrender to it and let the story go. So that there will be the habit, there will be the part that's like, oh no, but I'm so used to doing this. I want to do that. but I'm going to make a different choice. Now, when I was exchanging these messages with my friend and she was giving me this feedback of like, I noticed that this is something that you go into, and we all have our version of it, right? But I noticed that you go into this self-doubt. You're not trusting your decision. And I wonder if you could kind of, what would it be like to look at that and, recognize that as a habit. And it was interesting because I responded back to her because I was very open, because I'm very aware of it myself. And I'm in this space of really wanting to evolve patterns. But I could feel that tiny part that's like, I don't like hearing this feedback. I don't like hearing this. That could take it as a criticism, right? This is the tiny voice. It's like, don't tell me that I do this and that there's something wrong with it. And that is exactly the part that keeps us in the loop of our habit and our patterns. And you could almost say, it sounds very judgmental, but you could almost say it's the part that sabotages us. But really, the way that I see it is less of a saboteur and more of a part that is just super identified with itself. It's like, don't tell me who I am and that I'm not useful. Don't tell me that I should be changed or that you're going to let go of me, because that means death to it. But when I can look at it and just observe it and go, oh, that's so curious. That's so interesting that you feel that way. Okay, I hear you. I hear that that's like a death to your identity. But hey, guess what? Your way of being isn't helping me out. Maybe you think that you're helping me out, but it's actually not helpful to me. This is actually causing me a lot of stress and duress. It's not keeping me in harmony. It's not keeping me in coherence. It's not keeping me in peace, which I'd really like to experience. So I don't berate it. I don't be like, oh God, I hate this part of me and, blah, 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 because then you just get into internal conflict and internal battle and nobody changes or takes self-responsibility because nobody feels safe when we're attacking it, right? Whether that's your partner or your friend or your child or yourself and parts of yourself. So as she was, giving me this feedback, it was very tiny. I wasn't triggered at all, but I just noticed it. And I was like, that is so fascinating. That is so fascinating that part's like, no, I want to be who I am. But there's a much vaster part that's like, oh yeah, I really want to look at this habit because I don't want to replicate it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore because it's not serving me. And so this is where it's like, it's very humbling to be human. And because you know what, there are parts that we need to let go of. There are parts that we need to heal and evolve and alchemize and transmute. And there are parts that we have to let go of because they're simply not helping us anymore. They're not helpful. Maybe they served a purpose. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just part of our coping mechanism. Maybe they were just part of our trauma. Right? But either way, it's not useful to keep on replicating them again and again and again and again. Right? And so, the humbling part of it is this idea that we need to be perfect and that there aren't things that could use evolving. And the reason why we think we should be perfect and we take things personal and we get reactive or defensive is because it triggers the deeper belief that we're not good enough. And that has completely been indoctrinated into us. And it's not the truth. It's not the truth. You are innately, inherently, we all are good enough, worthy, lovable, significant. We matter, we belong, we're included. All of those things are absolutely intrinsic to who we are. It's just a belief. And it's a belief that our society really likes to pump out, right? So we have to just be humble and gentle and kind and be like, that's just a belief. It's just a paradigm. It's not the truth of who I am. And then you can even think about, last week's episode of expand out into the macro, expand into the essence of who you are. You're not this body. You're not this personality. It's in partnership, but you are the essence. You are your soul. So zoom out for a moment so that you don't take it so damn personal. Because it can feel really real, right? But it is kind of a dream. It is kind of an illusion when you're dreaming. It's like it makes me laugh of I'm sure women, you've all had this. I don't think men have it to the same degree, but women, I'm sure you have had a dream about your boyfriend or your husband that in your dream, he cheats on you, or in your dream, he talks to another woman. You wake up and you're like, oh, I'm angry at you. In my dreams, you cheated on you. You cheated on me. You need to apologize. that was just a dream. It wasn't real. But when you're in the dream, it feels really flippin' real, right? So life is no different. That to the human personality and to the ego, this feels very, very, very real, and like there is nothing else outside of this. But the soul knows this is just a character. This is just a character that I'm playing in this play. And it's super interesting and fascinating, but I am not that. I'm just having this experience through that, right? I also wanted to point to the, sorry, I'm spitting out a lot right now. I hope you're still with me. I just listened to this video the other day that was talking about repressed memory cells. So I don't know if you've heard of this before. I haven't heard of these cells, but I have heard that, our organs, our cells and our organs are constantly regenerating. So a liver, for example, completely regenerates every 6 weeks. It is an entirely new liver every 6 weeks. So what this woman was saying was, well, why then somebody that has cancer in their liver in January, why do they still have it in June? And she said the reason is because these repressed memory cells, when they're on their way out and they're dying, they basically hand over their consciousness, their identity, their beliefs, their coding to the next generation of cells and saying, this is who we are. There you go. Pass on the baton. And so technically you could say the liver is regenerating itself. It doesn't need to be diseased anymore. But the reason why it continues to be diseased is because the cell is carrying over the message and the coding to the next generation of cells. And they go, oh, okay, this is who we are. We're diseased, we're this, that, and the other. And there you go. That's how you have the continued disease, right? So the reason why I'm sharing this is because that just shows, again, it's so, as within, so without. So, our cells are totally conscious. And if you don't know that, you can get into Bruce Lipton's work or Joe Dispenza's work, or there's a lot of science now to prove that. But our cells are communities. I often think of like maybe as humans, we're just the cells of the universe, and the universe is a cell to the, whatever, some greater galaxy, and it's fractals, right? When we really get into the quantum, it's like we're all just fractals. And I loved what Richard Rudd was saying is that, you could look at just a part of an elephant, right? And you wouldn't see the whole elephant. But actually, he said, if you look at that part, like if you were to look at the trunk and you were to go into the fractal of that trunk, you would see the elephant in its entirety. So nothing is disconnected. Everything is interconnected. Everything. I mean, it's just amazing, right? It's really miraculous the way that consciousness and existence works. It's like, wow, what a piece of art. It's really phenomenal. So, but going back to, this messaging that the cells hand over, it just shows like kind of what we're up against. And it's not to be like, oh, damn, that's hard. But it's just, again, to show that because I've had my handful of clients that, over the years have been like, I can't shift this. I just can't shift this. And, they keep on making the same choices or they just find it hard. They've done loads of therapies. They've gone to different therapists and they're like, it's just not working. And then they get into this, well, this is just who I am. And it's just sometimes that the identification with the habit is so strong. It is so strong that it's really, it takes persistence, kindness, but it takes persistence and consistency. It really takes consistency. And that's why I say, sometimes people come to me and they're like, well, how often should I work with you and for how long? And it totally depends where that person is on their personal journey. But I said, like any sport or skill or art, if you do it once a month, you're not really going to learn it, right? Because you're putting new muscle memory in. If you're learning a sport, especially that's physical, you have to do it sometimes every day, definitely every week. As a ballet dancer, 6 days a week, I was in the studio. You only got 1 day off because if you took more than a week or two off, like, whoa, coming back into it and getting your muscle memory back into it was like painful. It's really painful. So, Yeah, just throwing that in, not as a kind of like, oh shit, there's so much to work against. It's just another thing to be able to recognize why sometimes it's challenging. And so there's nothing wrong with you and you're not doing it wrong. I do believe that we need to find a modality that works for us, and we need to find a practitioner, facilitator that we resonate with. So, I will always say to someone, make sure that my work resonates with you, because if it doesn't, it's not going to work. Really feel, does this person that I'm going to be working with and their approach, does it resonate with me? Does it feel in harmony with me? Because if the answer is yes, you can fly. If the answer is no, it's not really going to work, right? All of this is a relationship. So that's a lot. So yes, step by step, slowly, we can, make all of this conscious and begin to make those different choices. And then really reaffirm when we do and go, oh, that feels really good. And then it's so lovely when you have dear friends in your life that are like, wow, I can really see the evolution in you. And they're reflecting it back to you. And it's, then really take that in. And then also notice if there's any part of you that's like, but I don't want to change. I don't want to evolve, because that implies that I wasn't good enough before, and you didn't approve of me before, and you didn't like me before, and that wasn't good enough, and so I'm not going to change. No. I'm just playing that character out, because that is a character that can play, that can have a bit of a strop. And so then what do you do with that? You just go, okay, it's all right. I know you feel threatened right now that you're going to go into like non-existence, but you're not going to die. You're going to transmute into something else. You're going to evolve into something else. And Richard Rudd uses the he uses the dragonfly as an image. I think it's on the book of the Gene Keys, because he said it is one of the most amazing, like beyond just metamorphosis, of the caterpillar into the butterfly, because he said for the first 3 years it lives underwater as a predator. And then all of a sudden, very quickly, within a matter of hours, it shoots up like a reed out of the water and transforms into this amazing iridescent creature that flies. So it goes from the water element to the air element, which is completely different. And so he was saying that it's literally like moving from one dimension into another. And that is such a beautiful analogy of evolution, because sometimes we literally are shifting from one dimension into another, or from one frequency band into another frequency band. And sometimes often I would say our old habits of reactivity are keeping us in a lower frequency, not better or worse, not superior or inferior, just different. And when we make a different choice and we come into more in harmony and alignment with our true essence, we literally go up into a different octave, into a different frequency band, into a different dimension. So, and that can just keep on going and keep on going and keep on going. So, okay, this is getting super long. So the invitation today is just to, firstly, absorb this, because this has been a lot. You might even want to jot down some notes of just like, okay, what are these kind of initial steps? So firstly, how do you cultivate the observer so that you can consciously observe your reactivity as it's happening in live present moment, and without judgment, simply observe it? That is the first step. The second step is to observe that you have the ability to make a choice. You might not make that choice yet, but you have the ability to make that choice, again, with kindness and compassion, non-judgment. The third step would be to finally bring yourself into that point where you can slow down the reactivity to really get to that choice point and then make a different choice. Part of all of that is having the curiosity and creating the space to be able to observe the pattern and not over-identify with it. The more you create the space, the more you're able to witness it, the more you're able to slow down the process, disidentify, and eventually take a different route, right? So the invitation is just to maybe map this out for yourself, and then to just implement it by simply bringing it into your awareness. So the next time you go into a reaction, it might be later that day or even the next day where you're like, oh, right, I listened to that podcast and Corinne was talking about this. Like, oh, okay, what was going on there? What was happening? Okay, let me make it conscious. And then wherever you are along those steps and that journey, just bring your awareness into it. Awareness is the part that helps us to alchemize these things. So the invitation is just to really become the witness and get curious. Look at these parts of you with curiosity and compassion and understanding, and, notice the part that is like stubborn and doesn't want to change. And can you just hold that all in the lap of love with curiosity and gentleness and maybe even humor? When we disidentify with something, we can bring in a little bit of humor. And so now I can go, oh God, yeah, like when I go into that like crazy decision making, instead of being stressed out by it and blaming and shaming myself, I can go, oh, here we go. And just have a little bit of a lightness with it. So I'm going to set you off with that, and see where it takes you. And just know that it's a process and a journey, and it's not going to happen overnight. And that's totally okay. We're in the school of life, and we can take as long as we need. Sometimes it's lifetimes, right? Sometimes it's not just one life. So I hope that's been helpful. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.